This is the Muscles and Management Podcast, where we build your body and your business. Talking all things training, sports performance, and business for athletes and aspiring coaches to enhance your training and better your career. Muscles and Management is brought to you by Challenger Strength with your host, Jerry DiFilippo.
All right, everyone. Super excited to be back for another Q&A. Really enjoyed the last one that we did, and I got a lot of good feedback on it from all of you. Really enjoy the interactive part of this. Mike actually had recommended that I tag all of you who ask questions and get featured on the show when I post the show on Twitter, which I think is a cool kind of way to get everybody involved in the show. And I think it is pretty cool to know that people actually like I remember, Mike, when I started first listening to Joe DeFranco's podcast, and if like somebody asked a question, he would say who it was on his show, and he had a pretty big following. So like if he said your name on the show, it was like, oh, there's a lot of people hearing that and listening to it. So it kind of feels that like people would feel the same way about this. Another one of those kind of like wow moments that like kind of completely sunken in yet. But anyway, Mike's back with us. He moderated last time. I think it's kind of, now that I've done a Q&A with you moderating, I think it would kind of feel almost impossible to do one without it because I don't know, it's a tall task to literally do nothing but talk for 50 straight hour, without any interruption or have anybody kind of bouncing stuff off of you or asking the questions and all that kind of stuff. So it makes it more relaxed for me and easier to do. So appreciate you coming on. But yeah, Mike's back, everyone. So say hi to Mike.
Yeah, hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, the first one went really well. I'm excited to do another one.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also cool too, because we talked about this last time, but like sometimes you think of questions, when you ask me a question and then I might answer something and then you kind of think of something. And for the record too, guys, Patreon membership, what we're doing with that, weekly Meathead Monday. So if you've been a listener for a while, for about a year, maybe a little more, I had a second episode of this show every week on Mondays called Meathead Monday. Just kind of got a little too hectic to keep doing. It was a lot of time doing a second episode. Honestly, kind of impressed I even did it for as long as I did. It was like, I think a year, it was like a year plus, I think, where every Monday there was a Meathead Monday, which was basically like a 30-minute episode of either a Q&A, me running through a specific topic, what have you. Things got busier at the facility and it just became tougher to, I'm so dedicated to what we have to do in person that adding or having so many things to do when it comes to stuff like this can get hard. So kind of stepped away from those, but with the Patreon membership, I want to have that. That's like the base of what the Patreon membership is going to be about, having those weekly Monday episodes. And the reason I'm bringing it up is Mike's going to obviously, moderate those as well. And they're not going to be as much Q&A, but more like, me putting shows together, topics, like things that I think are important to talk about and discuss that are hard to address in like a simple tweet or an Instagram post or whatever. So that'll be the kind of base of that Patreon membership, and Mike will be moderating those as well. So something to be looking forward to. Mike, I don't know if you saw me tweet about this. I made a point, so I'm saying today as I say this, but by the time you guys listen to this episode, it might be a few weeks prior. But I tweeted out that I don't know, I get aggravated sometimes with like the sense of entitlement that can sometimes shine through when people send DMs asking for things or for questions or whatever it is. And I got kind of frustrated this morning because I do feel like sometimes Julian had an experience that he had mentioned where a kid reached out to him and was like, oh, want to get my vertical up or whatever. Like, do you have a program? And he was like, hey, how are you? Like, what's going on or whatever. Like, he'd never spoken to the kid before. And the kid just responds back, do you have a program? And it's like, dude, I'm throwing you a softball here. Like, I'm trying to initiate conversation and hope that you have the manners to kind of say the same thing back to me. Like, hey man, like, been listening to your stuff for a while, whatever. Was curious as if you had any resources available for getting your vertical jump, getting my vertical jump better. So like, I think that like that is exactly how I would answer somebody who said, okay, well, if you don't like how people DM you, what should you do? And basically what I'm getting at, and I just went back and looked at it too, because I wanted to make sure I wasn't being too hard on this person. Someone had reached out to me and pretty much just introduced who they were, which was a start, and then been like, would want to get on a Zoom with you sometime. And I've gotten plenty of DMs like stuff like this, so it wasn't even one particular person, but like there have been a couple where it was just like, hey, I'm so and so, would like to do a Zoom and pick your brain. Like, I don't know about you, but me personally, like, would not DM somebody I've never spoken to before and ask them that.
No, no,
like
not
that,
like that.
Yeah, like I would have been like, hey, like, been a follower, love your stuff. Maybe we can connect sometime and talk shop or whatever it is. Not like, hey, I'd like to do a Zoom with you when you have a second. Like, no. Like, to me, like, I know it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but like when you put out a lot of free content and you spend a lot of time training people and doing this type of stuff, like, it maybe isn't intentional from the person who does it, but it feels like they're kind of taking your time or content for granted, if that makes sense. I just want to address that. How do you feel about that?
No, I agree. I mean, some of the stuff that I do, obviously I help Jerry, but some of the stuff I do for my own business, is reaching out to people. And I still, like, probably to a fault, over like worry that you need to, you need to come at situations like that with respect and like at least
just like how you DM me when we
connect. Yeah, like get a dialogue going, tell them why you're like messaging them. And
I'm pretty sure it was like, hey, like your content. You'd been following me for a little bit too.
Yep.
Like your content about training, whatever. Like just letting you know I do some virtual assistant work and all that other stuff. Just curious if you ever had anybody do that for you. You didn't say, do you need me, do whatever. You literally just said, have you ever had somebody do anything like that for you? That was your question.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's not always the same. Like, some of these people who probably want some information from you or want to learn from you, they might not technically have a ton to offer in return. But at the same time, if you don't, you just need to be mindful that, these are real people. You are a real person with a real job, and, you can't just live on your DMs and just give people this extra free content that you're not already providing. And you just need to be mindful of that, I guess.
Yeah. And I feel like I would be equally parts upset if, like, one, I specialized in doing remote stuff for a living, and for all the more reason why should I give something for free for somebody when this is literally how I make a living? I'd be pissed. That's not me, because 95% of what we do is in person. The other part of me, considering what I actually do for a living, looks at it as like, I get aggravated because there's all these people in our facility that really look and pay for help and all this other stuff. And, it's not fair to dedicate free time to people in DMs when, there's people that literally pay to come in person. Like, I say the same thing all the time. I get so frustrated with people that, like, hit you up. And if you respond saying, hey, I offer, remote training, or if I say, hey, I could do a consultation, as soon as there some kind of dollar value gets brought up, 95% of the people are going to just back off and stop DMing you. And that aggravates me even more, because then it just shows me what your intentions are. You're just looking to get something for free. And that's what bothers me. Whereas if you DM somebody, you're like, hey, do you have any, free resources out there that I could check out? Or better yet, honestly, we're in such a day and age, and I know someone like me, especially, because, like, I can say this with confidence. I post so much free content and so much stuff out there that what I bring to the table. Like, you can get exposed to what comes with the information and everything, because it's so much out there for free that, like, to me, that should be the stuff that you look at to see if you think it's worth it to spend money on it. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah, I think I would guess that people who have been following you for a while and actually actively follow you probably aren't the people that are doing what we're talking about, because they see how much content you give, and they probably
it's funny you say that. It's usually like when a tweet goes viral, a tweet gets like 3, 4, 5, 600 likes, and I get a bunch of new followers. Someone pops a DM going, hey coach, love the tweet. What do you think about doing this? Any suggestions for me to run or whatever? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, man, like that, you're just asking questions that would take me literally a half hour to answer. Like, I don't know what you want from me. Like, if I took a screen recording of the amount of DMs in my message request right now, I showed one of the kids in the gym today, 'cause I was kind of ranting about it to somebody in the gym today. I was like, think of ranting to Julian about like why it aggravates me. And there was probably like 300-400 of them in there. And the ones I don't answer are usually the ones, and this is most of them, are because they're such tough questions to answer in a short little response that I'm like, I'm not even going to start doing this, because here's the problem. If I answer a couple, then I feel like I have to owe everybody and answer everybody else.
Sure.
And it's never a simple yes or no.
How do you pick a few? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a steep slope, because if you even genuinely wanted to try to just randomly answer some, like, next thing you know, the day's over. If you have to get that, because you're not going to give a half-assed answer. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
This is what you do. So you're going to go in depth.
The kids that are coming to the gym, the hundreds of kids that I'm training, like they're texting me, asking questions and doing whatever. Like, they need to be the people that get the most of my attention, right? So it's tough for me, and I try to answer them. I save a lot of them, and I do them on these Q&As, and I try to see what people ask me in my tweets and make tweets about the stuff that they ask me. Like, those are, in my opinion, ways that I can do it and help more people by letting more people see the answers than me responding to a paragraph with 3 specific questions in it. Like, that's my advice. If you want to ask somebody a question, make it a short, succinct question that, like, maybe it could be a yes or no answer. Say, hey, do you have any resources available, that would answer these questions? Or just look on their website too. Like, I have probably like 5 or 6 different ebooks that are on the site, whether it's Nutrition from Julian. I made one that's like $9.99. That's like 50 friggin' pages. I have free stuff out there, and just, there's a lot of content out there to be had.
Well, that's what I was going to say, just as like advice to someone who does want to reach out, because there's probably a pretty good portion that aren't doing it just selfishly. They just aren't really aware.
Yeah. And that's why I want to let them know, like, how do you do it?
But I think one thing that's really important, and one thing that I do in general, whether it's for personal or for business, is like, before you ask a question to one of these people, like, go on their website, like you said, and see if you can answer it without asking. Yeah. And if you can't, it might be actually a good question to ask them. As long as you do it in a respectful way, because it might make them realize that they haven't given a way to find that, or it's something that then they can lead you to their, paywalled content. So.
Yeah. And I really think it's annoying that there's this perception that if someone tries to like make money for doing stuff like this, they're a piece of shit. Like, I'm going to start a Patreon. It'll have a small monthly fee attached to it. And like the highest level of that, which would be like $10 a month, which is nothing, will literally have every 2 weeks, you'll have a chance to do a Q&A with me on Zoom and just ask questions. Like, if I'm going to do stuff like that, I got to know you're at least, appreciating my time and information enough to pay at least even a small amount of money. Like, that's to me, it's not even, it's nice to get some money, a couple $100 a month, whatever it is, for taking the time, but it just shows that somebody's serious enough. It takes you seriously enough and appreciates you enough to not think they could just get all of this stuff for free. Like, to me, that just shows someone has no respect for you. If it's a simple question, it's one thing, but when people start dropping large, long messages, I feel like half the time it's innocent, but there are some people that are entitled. So, if you're a young kid or a young coach starting out, man, like, my advice, if you're a really good person, which is probably most of the people that's in the DMs, try to just introduce yourself and do stuff like that, and just start a conversation with somebody, or just say, hey, could you point me to resources? I usually answer those questions. Can you point me to resources that would help me figure this thing out? Probably not a good idea to just say, like, here's my life, or here's 6 different questions in 2 paragraphs. What do you think about this? Like, I'm not writing a program for you. I'm not critiquing a program. That's just like a lot of time that goes into that, and it's not something that can be easily answered. So, ask for resources. Like, hey, can you point me to something, your favorite books, whatever. I love answering those. Or make it a productive question I could do on a Q&A. And this goes for all coaches. I know I'm not the only one that feels this way, because a lot of coaches I see express this sentiment.
Definitely not just you.
Times.
Yeah.
And it's probably not a good idea. Sorry, just one more thing. Probably not a good idea to just ask somebody to jump on a call with you, or like, hey, what's your number? Can I text you? I have some questions. Like, nah. Unless someone knows who you are, or you've talked to them for a while, whatever, like, we would not be able to operate as functional coaches if that was what we were doing all the time. So you got to have a little bit more feel. So go ahead. What was your last thing?
I was just gonna say, this certainly isn't just you. Like, I have other clients who not in the same space, but kind of similar in terms of like whether it's training for certain sports or something like that. And they get the same issues, they get the same problems. And one thing for people to think about, like if people like Jerry or other people were answering all these questions, like they wouldn't be able to get to the high level of content they're producing and stuff for us because they'd be too busy answering questions all day long. So
yeah, and exactly like the podcast, the time I have to do the programs for people in the gym, it's just not feasible. Yep. I know a lot of other coaches feel that way, and it's just also the way you go about it too. I mean, it goes a long way just to do something a little bit differently than that doesn't come across as like someone owes you information, if that makes sense.
100%.
All right. With that said, let's get to actually answering some of the questions in my DMs. Like a perfect example and a good segue. What do you got for me, Mike?
Yeah, so the first one I have is from Rob Ackerman. His handle is Akey123. And he is just asking, what are the top 3 things to help skinny high school players get ready for winter hoops?
Got it. All right, good question. I'm going to say this right off the bat. I think this is important, and I've talked about this before. A lot of times with basketball players, especially, you're looking at taller build, a little harder time putting size on, right? And it's also a sport that's very taxing in terms of activity. So like you're going out and practicing, you're doing a lot of movement up and down the court. It just burns a lot of calories. If you're not fueling your body the right way and you're not starting out with a simple idea of like, how much do I weigh? What do I want to get to weight wise? What is my activity level? And, if you add the activity level to my base size and then what I'm trying to get to size wise, and you don't find out what your calorie number should be to reach that goal and then go after to try to get to that calorie number, you're going to have a really, really hard time putting size on with all the activity. Because if you're playing basketball, you're lifting, you're doing training on the side, whatever it is, and you're just eating enough just to kind of get by, or you're not tracking it, you're going to have a hard time. And the reason I say tracking it is so important is because, if you don't know what you need, and then on top of that, you don't know what you are taking in, it's just like going into a cave with a blindfold on and just trying to get around and navigate. It's like you're going to just start walking into walls, kind of going backwards. Like you're really never going to have an idea of like what, it takes specifically dialed in to get to where you want to be. So if I'm 150 pounds and, if I wasn't playing basketball and doing that activity and I just wanted to stay at 150 pounds, I needed to eat 2,000 or 2,500 calories a day, right? So let's just say that's the number. But then I want to get to 170, and then I add 4 basketball practices and 3 lifting sessions a week. I'm probably, to stay at 150, going to need to at least eat 3,000 plus calories. So then you got to add on top of that, all right, well, just to maintain where I am with all the activity I'm doing, I need to eat 3,000 calories. Well, if I want to gain a couple pounds a week, I probably need to have another 1,000 on top of that. So now you're looking at 4,000. So you can't even get to that point if you have no idea where you are, what you need to stay where you are, and then what you need to do to kind of gain as much as you want to gain. So the first thing I would suggest, and we literally have free ebooks out there that address this from Julian on how to figure these things out and calculate them. Go on our site. We have an ebook out there that helps you calculate all of your macros. That one might cost a little bit of money. There's like one that's like $20 that literally gives you every formula and help you would need to figure these numbers out. So to me, that's super worth it. You're spending $19.99 for one-time fee to basically have all of this laid out for you on how to calculate it, and you could use it for the rest of time. And then Julian also has some ebooks out there on supplementation, nutrient timing, and all that kind of stuff. And those I know are free. So go find resources like that so that you can get an idea of what you need to be eating to actually reach those numbers. And then go get an app like MyFitnessPal and go on Amazon and get like a $13 food scale. And, you're going to be in a really good position just to make sure you're eating and getting enough of food in and enough calories to get to where you want to be. And then simply put, eat breakfast. There's no shot you're going to get to where you want to be if you're not starting out the day with a breakfast. It's the number one thing we see with our athletes that come in and are having trouble gaining weight. You say, what did you eat for breakfast? And they're like, oh, I had nothing yet, and it's noon. Like that's problematic. So that's number one in a long-winded response. That's number one. Read that question to me again. I just want to make sure I'm answering it correctly. Mike?
Yeah, sorry. It was just how to, that was it. I mean, top 3 things,
weight, right?
Yeah, top three things. But I
Okay.
mean,
So number two, that was pretty long for number one, but number one would be that. Number two is, obviously make sure you're lifting, really get into a good regimented strength training program that addresses, higher rep activity to build size. It's traditional strength training. I would suggest at least 3 days a week especially if you're in high school and you're a little more advanced. That's a staple. That's something you need to be doing. So make sure you're getting that addressed and taking care of that. And then the third one I would say is really be careful of any additional work that you're doing. Things like cross country in the off season. How many basketball players, go do cross country because they want to get in shape for their sport and they have trouble gaining weights, and now they're doing all of this running, and how much that adds to your activity log that makes you have to eat that much more. And if you're not eating that much more, one, if you have trouble eating, it's going to make your life even harder because you have to eat even more. Two, you're probably not going to try to eat that much and you're not going to realize it. And you're going to have no ability to gain weight, and you'll probably even lose a little weight from doing that extra running. So doing a thing like cross country before your season might not be a good idea. Doing extra conditioning during your season or up until your season might not be a great idea. Like, you're probably in good shape and the putting size on part is a little more important to you. So understand that every little thing that you add when it comes to extra conditioning and training and stuff like that is just that much more you need to do in terms of fueling yourself to just gain weight or even maintain. So that would be number three. So find out what you need, calculate what you need, and then track what you need to get to. Get into a regimented strength training program, at least probably 3 days a week. And number three is be careful of just doing extra for just trying to feel like you're working harder. Everyone wants to, feel like they're taking part of the grind or whatever. Just know it could be to your detriment. So I think I got that right. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good. I just wanted to add, you had mentioned the 2 ebooks. If you go to challengerstrength.com and go to more, there's 2 of them. There's a free one, Fuel Your Strength.
That's what you were doing when I said Mike.
Yeah.
See, this guy's never not doing anything, man. This is why he's great.
So there's a free one. It's Fuel Your Strength. Just throw your email and name in, and it's got like grocery list, pre and post training guidelines, hydration, some other stuff. And then if you really want to get deep dive, there's a $19.99, and that's everything. That's macros. That's a complete caloric needs, specific macronutrients, like everything. So those are the 2. You can get to both of those on the website if you go over the more header.
If we didn't charge it for that, we should be sued by ourselves for malpractice for putting out too much good information for free. Because that literally, you'll never need someone to do your macros or calories for you again if you buy that. So it's just a no-brainer in my opinion. And a lot of people have actually purchased that. I got to say, it's at least 100 people have gotten that since it's come out. So it's definitely worth it. And shout out Julian, and go follow Julian too. He's putting stuff out there all the time, and he actually, loves basketball and played himself. So he talks about this a lot. So go check out Julian's page if you haven't already. I tweet him out or retweet him and post him on Instagram all the time. So if you follow me, odds are you've seen him. But anyway, I don't want to ramble too much. What do we got coming up?
Next one's Rich Covey at Box Band Chains. And they have thoughts on aerobic versus anaerobic work capacity for football. And for example, like 110 test versus high volume GPP work. And he has an opinion, but he's looking for articles from well-respected sports condition trainers in the field to help a friend to present it to his head coach. So thoughts on aerobic and anaerobic work capacity for football in general.
Yeah. So I would say, even screw going to look at the articles, just, take some statistics. Like, I'll tell you what, because the NFL is going to have the most widespread of available information on stuff like this. Go get some information on the average length of a play in an NFL game, the average amount of time between plays in an NFL game, and the average amount of active play that goes on in a 60-minute NFL game. I think there's like 4 minutes of actual active play going on during an NFL game, right? So if you go in time an NFL play and you see it's in that 4 to 6 second window, with maximum or close to maximum output, followed by pretty substantial rest, even if it's only 30 seconds, it's still like a 5-to-1 ratio of rest to work. It really starts to answer the question for you of, okay, what should my training consist of? If I have a sport that's more anaerobic in nature, maybe it's not full recovery all the time, but it's closer to longer recovery than it is to less recovery. when you look at those rest to work ratios. So if it were more aerobic in nature, it'd be more steady state, but less intense. So the plays would be, not near max output, and the time to rest would be a little shorter, and the duration of the plays would be a little longer. You don't see plays in the NFL that go for 30 seconds where the lineman's kind of just like lightly blocking the guy in front of you. No, you see a 5-second play where the lineman's trying to drive the guy through the turf, or the receiver's running a route that's full speed, or there's a handoff or what have you. And then they're huddling and they're doing a play and whatever. And yeah, that can change if you have like, not spread offense, no huddle offense, and the times are a little shorter or whatever. But odds are there's going to be enough rest in between where something like and this is especially annoying to me when I see these linemen running 110-yard sprints, and it just makes no sense. Like they're never sprinting that long, or sprinting much at all for that matter, on the field. So it makes no sense to test them like that. And it makes no sense for other positions either, because you're never going to exert yourself at that high of a level. The 110 needs to be done in such a short amount of time that it's such a high level of your output. And then, so let's say even if you're at 80 to 85% of your max output, you're only resting for 20 to 30 seconds, however long it is. I don't even know, but it's something ridiculous like that. And then you're doing another one and have to do it at that high output again. That just does not come close to matching the ratios of play in an actual game. I know Rugby Strength Coach has a really good test that is being adopted more and more by professional teams and college teams. It's the Tribe test. So go check the Tribe test out, and you can present that to your coach if you want to. I know that's a good alternative, because a lot of times these coaches say, okay, well, if we don't do this test, then what's the option? And then it's kind of hard to think of something that you can use and kind of implement. The Tribe test is really good. It gets a lot of good reviews, and obviously, Kier, Rugby Strength Coach, is a very smart guy who has done some great work. So that would be my biggest answer to you is take a stopwatch out, even if your own team, and get some notes down on what the work rates are and the rest rates of the sport itself. And you can present that alone and just show how, take the intervals of your conditioning test and match them up to what the intervals of the sport are. And if there's a big divide between the two, it's going to really show that you need to look elsewhere. So obviously with that answer, I don't think, it's going to be beneficial to run a 110 test when it comes to what the demands are of the sport. When it comes to aerobic versus anaerobic, I do think you need a basic aerobic, a base of aerobic capacity, but that can be pretty easily developed. You could be doing bike work for that early on in an off season and kind of build that layer. And then I really do feel that getting better at recovering between anaerobic bouts is best achieved by recovering between anaerobic bouts. So, a lot of guys out there now are doing, skill players are running routes on a field and timing the rest up based on what it would be in a game, and, getting exposed to the circumstance they're going to be facing when they're on the field. Stacking anaerobic bouts like that. So like doing a 4 or 5 second route, resting, and then doing another 4 or 5 second route like that is a really good way to get acclimated to those anaerobic bouts you're going to see in a game situation versus nonstop, slower paced conditioning that would be more on the aerobic side of things. So, Mike, you think I answered that pretty clearly?
Yeah, everything. That's really good.
All right. So that would be my answer. I don't know much about articles are out there. Like, to me, I don't really look for articles on it because it's pretty common sense and something I believe in, and kind of just explain using common sense and logic. But track what the sport entails from a time perspective and match it up to maybe the conditioning test that someone might want to do. And you can kind of show if it makes sense or not.
I think if someone just thinks how you just worded that is so good. Like it seems so simple when you say it, but if people are asking questions, they might not have done this to where, think realistically of an actual game and the amount of time that things are happening and just reflect that onto the conditioning,
Yeah. So, it's a pretty easy way to figure it out.
For sure. Okay. So let's see. The next one is Joe Alstat, at Alstat Joe. In your opinion, what are the best few things to do to increase speed and how often to do them?
Can I say that again? Sorry.
Yeah, no. He wants to know the best few things to do to increase speed, and then kind of a side question, how often to do them. So just programming for speed, essentially.
All right. Let's attack this at a couple different angles. You're an untrained athlete. Get stronger. you're young and you're weak, get stronger. That'll be the easiest way to get faster early on as a young athlete. Like, taking someone who can barely, squat 25 pounds on the side of a bar and getting them up to 300 pounds, 250 pounds, 300 pounds is going to make a big difference for their speed, especially their acceleration and their start because it's heavy. Same thing with a deadlift. So if you're a young athlete, get stronger, sprint with heavier loads. And then obviously this goes without saying, like sprint full speed with maximum rest, like the number one thing you could do. As you get more advanced, you now try to go beyond just traditional getting stronger and start to exert more force in smaller amounts of time. So bar speed work. I said loaded sprints. It's a great tool, to get your rate of force better. So let's say you're doing a heavy sled push or a traditional strength training exercise. That's improving more of your force producing ability in a slower sense. So like really raw force. That's going to help your first couple strides, right? So and I'll say that too. Like if you want to get your first step, quote unquote, first step better, you need to get your force application ability, a little bit better, which is kind of contradicting the normal belief that like you got to get things moving faster. You actually want your feet on the ground a little longer so that you could exert more force to improve your first step and your acceleration ability. Once you do that, though, as I was alluding to, can you produce more force in a shorter amount of time? Because obviously when you sprint, your foot isn't on the ground. It's pretty quick in the amount of time that it's on the ground as you're going from one stride to the next versus, a heavy conventional strength exercise where it might take you 3 to 4 seconds to move that deadlift bar completely off the ground when you're going really heavy. So obviously that's going to diminish in terms of transfer. So you want to start to use things that make you exert force, but in a quicker amount of time. So a lighter load on the deadlift and moving it faster, loaded jumps, loaded sprints with like medium or moderate amounts of weight are going to make it so that you are exerting force, but rapidly enough where it improves something called rate of force development, which is your ability to exert high amounts of force rapidly. Sprinting and power output activity are heavily dependent upon rate of force development. So when it comes to building rate of force development, once you have that base of force and strength and you've been training for a little bit, start to move a slightly lighter loads as fast as you possibly can. And that's going to go a long way when it comes to building that rate of force. So younger athlete or athlete that's pretty untrained, improve their overall force producing ability with traditional strength training, heavy sled pushes, things like of that nature. And obviously, regularly sprint. Every athlete should regularly sprint regardless. And then as you get a little more advanced from there, in addition to your regular sprint work at full speed, start to mix in, sled sprints, loaded jumps, all stuff like that. It's super important to make sure you're getting to that part of the equation in doing things that have a little weight involved, but as fast as possible. It's an important distinction to make. When you want to get faster in acceleration, 10-yard sprints with full recovery at full speed. You want to improve top speed, longer sprints, obviously, but maybe for athletes like baseball or hockey players that don't spend a lot of time in the higher range of top speed, like it's shorter acceleration-based sports, and you want to get that training effect, you can do what are called flying sprints. So 5, 10, 15-yard buildup into like what's called a top speed zone, where you have maybe 5 or 10 yards at your max speed, where you're more upright and you're doing, mechanics that are closer related to top speed, but you're just not making yourself go through that entire 30, 40, 50-yard sprint. You're isolating that speed zone, so to speak. Could be pretty effective for acceleration-based athletes. What do you think of that one, Mike? How to do on that one?
Yeah, I have a feeling you could probably do another hour talking about it. So
no, for sure.
But no,
I wanted to make sure the acceleration part is important, especially for team sport athletes. Build the strength. And then once you see like test your vertical, test your sprint speed, whatever, and track those as you improve like your quote unquote 1 rep max on a strength exercise. And if you see that there start to be diminishing returns in terms of that number improvement, like the deadlift or the squat goes up, but you're not seeing much out of those other numbers, then it's an easy indication that it might be time to start like changing your focus in terms of what you're looking at, so to speak.
Yeah, I think, obviously I'm not super knowledgeable in the field, but working with you and listening to you talk a lot about it, some things stick. And I think one big thing is, obviously we don't know what level this person is or who he's asking about, but so many, even like pre-high school, even high schoolers, it's just as simple as get stronger for probably most of them.
Yeah, no, for sure.
So yeah. Okay. Next one.
We got two more.
Yeah, two more. Anthony Rodriguez at Elite Second Baseman, and he is wanting to talk about rest. Good evening. I saw your recent post on resting and having a plan. I struggle with that because I feel like I need to work every day. Any advice?
Yeah, it really comes down to discipline. You have to look at yourself and say, I work hard. And I talked about this before. I think this actually might be the tweet that he's alluding to. It takes a lot of discipline to make sure you're getting your work done, day in and day out, week in and week out. But I think it takes even more discipline when you're a hardworking person to have those 2 days a week where you say, I'm not going to do anything today. I'm going to just flat out not do anything. It's programmed in my schedule that I'm going to rest today. And I think it's important. And the advice that I can give when you want to, look at how do I get better at resting is it's got to be planned. If I have 4 planned training days a week in my schedule, I should have my rest days planned out so that I know when Wednesday or Saturday or whatever day gets here, I'm supposed to rest and not do anything that day. To me, it makes it a lot easier to stick to than kind of just flying by the seat of your pants when it comes to your training schedule, because then you don't really know when you should be resting. And just have discipline. Like, I know you want to feel like every day you're going out there and you're doing something and getting something done, but just understand that, not doing something that given day could be doing way more for you than actually doing something well. You know what I'm saying, Mike? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think it's better than the opposite of someone obviously thinking they're doing it.
Yeah, I'd rather you work than not want to work. Like that's that. Okay, let's get over that hurdle first. But
right.
I think it goes without saying that every above average athlete has a pretty good work ethic. So now what separates those from the ones that can stay healthy and perform? And it's, I think, the discipline and the knowledge and patience to know that you need to rest and recover to get gains. Like if you want to get bigger and faster, like you can't be sprinting 6 days a week if you want to get faster. You can't get bigger if you're not, fueling up and obviously I mentioned this earlier in the other question, but eating enough. But then in addition to the eating, like if you're not recovering, giving your muscles time to rest and relax and recover, you're not going to get the results you want from a building size standpoint. And obviously building size isn't the number one most important thing to athletes, but something like speed that I already alluded to, sprinting 5 or 6 days a week with non-optimal rest, in between is going to just make those sessions useless. Like if you can't go full speed, you're not going to get as much out of it as you could if you did 2 full speed days per week for sprints with enough rest in between. And on top of that, you're going to just leave yourself open for overuse injuries, right? Like you're already doing so much in your sport. If you're never giving yourself a day off, good luck. Like, what are you going to possibly do if, you're not giving yourself time and you're running and doing high stressful activities with, minimal rest and recovery? So I think that's important. Is maturity. Like, I think that comes with maturity. Like, how many of my athletes I absolutely yell at because they just don't stop, right? And it's like, you gotta understand, you gotta stop doing this. You're becoming your own worst enemy. Like, yeah, great, we got over the hurdle of you wanting to work hard. That's the rookie level for me. To me, like the ability to go in and want to work is the rookie level. If you can't have that, you're not going to get far at all, unless you're like uber talented. But like to me, that's like a prerequisite. Like that's like a bachelor's degree now. Like you gotta have that at least. And then now we're talking like what makes me get into the top 5, 10, 1% is, having the patience to recover and rest, having a schedule. How many kids train with no schedule whatsoever?
Yeah, a ton.
Oh, I'm just gonna go train today. I'm gonna go get some extra work in. Like I had my trainer 3 or 4 days a week, at the facility, but I'm gonna go to the park 2 extra days and just I'm gonna get that work. You know how people talk, right? Like I'm gonna grind today. Like I'm gonna do what I got to do. I'm in the trenches. And they're out there and they're just running wind sprints up and down the field nonstop because they want to sweat and get shiny and take a picture for Instagram and look good, or feel like they're working hard. And then they come in and they've yet to gain a pound after 6 weeks of hard strength training. And they're like, I don't get it, man. Like, why I haven't gained weight? Like, what's up with me? Like, it's my genetics. I just can't gain weight. Like it's never going to work for me because I'm just not made to gain weight. And then you find out that they're doing 6 extra days of training other than what you're doing with them. You're like, yeah, that's why you're not going to gain weight. You're not eating enough, first of all. And if it wasn't bad enough that you weren't eating enough, you're doing all this extra activity I didn't tell you to do. and you're making it hard on yourself to get bigger. You're doing sprints when you're not recovered, so they're not making you faster. You're just doing extra conditioning. So it's like you're just shooting yourself in the foot. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's the same. If Anthony follows your stuff, I mean, it's no different than, taking it to the micro, on a single day. Like if you have 7 sprints scheduled, like you're not going to do them back to back to back to back, or you're not going to get anything out of them. And now you're just wasting your time and energy. Like it just extend that into days, right? So, all these people who are grinding are in the trenches, like you said, and that not only are they working hard, they're working harder than they need to. And it's just detrimental for sure. I think like what you said, though, it's kind of a thing maybe that's a little bit outside of athletics, the whole like grind, like culture, hustle mentality thing where don't have time to sleep, don't have time to do this, don't have time to do that. But in training, that's obviously not the right way to look at things.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's like a big one. It's just maturity.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're going to spend all the time working hard, something as simple as resting, like it's just something you need to be able to do. Like that's it. Okay. So we have one more, and it is from Tyler Vendetti at Tyler Vendetti. And he wants to know about your thoughts on intermittent fasting. Well, he already knows your thoughts, it looks like, but he wants more info. So he says, hey, I'm sure you've seen this in a tweet before, but what do you not like about intermittent fasting for athletes out of curiosity?
Oh, yeah. This is the day I put up things that athletes shouldn't be doing. And I said intermittent fasting. I said bodybuilding programs, CrossFit. Man, this really pissed a lot of people off.
I was going to say, I remember this tweet and it got a ton of engagement. And
a lot of people liked it. Like, a lot of smart people liked it. But then a lot of idiots who don't understand context whatsoever were like, what's wrong with a bodybuilding program? And I'm like, all right, well, lifting for hypertrophy in a good strength training and speed training program isn't the same as going on bodybuilding.com and taking Jay Cutler's 6 weeks for bigger shoulders program and running it in the gym. Like it's not the same thing. So like, oh my God, people just freaking piss me off, man.
So Tyler is saying he's pretty ignorant in terms of a lot of the dieting stuff. But he was curious.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go on a rant there. It's just like just context, man. Like I'm not saying don't do bodybuilding programs isn't saying don't lift for hypertrophy. They're two completely different things. Yeah. Bodybuilding programs say hit 8 sets of 12 on the leg extension machine and then go do shoulders and Arnold presses. I'm not saying you shouldn't do hypertrophy in your program. I'm just saying don't take guidance strictly from bodybuilding programs. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Just like intermittent fasting might work for some people, and I'm going to get to answer this question right now. Why don't I like it for athletes? Athletes are so active and they're doing so many things in a given day. It's generally recommended that athletes be having carb and protein sources prior and after high level activity. So if they're doing a strength training session and a sport training session in a given day, they should be having a quality carb and protein source before and after each of those within an hour or so. So if you're intermittent fasting, last time I checked intermittent fasting, and I kind of use a version of it myself, but I'm not an athlete anymore. It involves a protocol where you're not eating for large chunks of hours. So you might eat a big meal and then not eat again for 10 to 12 hours or 8 hours, whatever it is. Like that's not going to work with your athlete that's active multiple times a day and has a busy schedule. College athletes have classes they need to be sharp for. They have a lift in the morning classes and then a practice. If you're intermittent fasting and only eating in one small window, there's no way you can fuel yourself properly for those, multiple activities you're doing during a given day. You can get by, of course, and get it done. But like in terms of optimal performance and fueling yourself the right way for those things, you need to be eating before and after those activities. And if you're doing those things a couple times a day, intermittent fasting, how can you do it? You know what I mean, Mike? Like how can you?
No, yeah.
How can you eat before and after something that occurs twice within 5 or 6 hours if you only eat every 8 hours?
Well, and you're going into like optimizing, like to get the most out of your workouts and staying like sharp and everything. But I'm just thinking earlier to what you said, take that high school athlete that's supposed to be getting 4,000 calories a day. And if you're cutting yourself off to eat from 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., like that's a tall task.
Yeah, it's going to be tough to get what you need in your body during, all of that type of stuff if you're not, giving yourself a big enough window to eat. I think it just limits you a lot. I really do think intermittent fasting is generally only really beneficial to people that like have trouble, not eating a lot of food. Like for me, if I just reserve my time to eat for a big dinner at the end of the day, and I eat that big dinner and it's a lot of food, it's going to fill me up so that I don't want to eat. Right. Like in that time span that I'm eating. If I'm not eating the rest of the day, it only gives me so many opportunities to eat. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. Well, there's a reason that it works so well for people who want to lose weight, because it restricts the amount of time you can eat and it makes you feel full when you are eating. But in terms of an athlete who needs fuel, like it just doesn't seem like a great idea.
Yeah, most athletes are generally having the problem of keeping weight on or gaining weight, not losing it. Is from my experience. There's very minimal athletes that I've had that are like, oh, I got to lose weight. Generally, it's they don't eat enough to fuel themselves. So like, I think that's the biggest reason why I wouldn't recommend it. It's just like not giving you enough opportunities to fuel yourself for all the activities you're doing. So was that the last one?
It was the last one. Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you for these questions. We're going to keep doing more of these. I want to probably have a Q&A episode for the podcast every, maybe 5 or 6 weeks. So, we'll keep doing these every so often, and it's a good way for me to, answer some of the questions that are stacked up in my DM. So, I apologize for the rant at the beginning of the show about that, but I think it's just important to address, and I want to make sure no one thinks I'm an asshole and understands where I'm coming from. But yeah, though, this is fun. Mike, thank you. I don't think I could get through 45 minutes to an hour of answering questions without somebody moderating. So I appreciate you as always.
Yeah, no problem.
I hope it's fun for you and you're, learning something when I talk. So someone has to. But thank you as always. I appreciate it, guys. I hope you enjoyed, and I will talk to you next week. Peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of Muscles and Management, brought to you by Challenger Strength. I'm your host, Jerry DiFilippo, signing off from the show that's changing how we view sports performance, training, and business.